So looking at the motions of the foot and the ankle, remember we're going to have three different planes of motion here. So the first one we're going to look at is going to be sagittal plane. So that is dorsiflexion, and then obviously coming back is going to be plantar flexion. So let's make sure we understand each one of those motions, understand what is moving on what, which are the convex surfaces, which are the concave surfaces. Looking at the next one here, this is going to be abduction. Obviously moving back towards the center line or midline is going to be adduction. And this is adduction of the foot and the ankle. Again, understand which are the moving parts, understand what is moving on what. Like I said, we have a lot of stacked objects here. That motion is inversion. So understand what inversion means. Also understand what eversion means. So that's moving into inversion, and understand that moving back is going to be eversion. Now looking at this next motion, that's going to be eversion. Look at what structures will be stressed, what structures will have compressive forces placed on them, what structures will have tensile forces placed on them as well. Very important to understand all of this. So looking at these motions, again, we're going to look at dorsiflexion here just from a little different perspective, followed by plantar flexion. So get a good appreciation for how that talus is a convex surface and how it moves. Also start getting a good appreciation for how those structures are going to move on one another. Obviously looking here, this is going to be the lateral aspect of the foot, so you get another appreciation for how that calcaneus and talus fit together, how the calcaneus and the navicular fit together as well. Very important to know as we start moving through the different joints and different motions that we have at the foot and the ankle. This is obviously looking at the calcaneus. We're basically looking at a back to front approach here. Understand the medial side of the calcaneus, understand the lateral side, understand and look at how that talus articulates with the calcaneus. Remember, we're going to have three different articulation points there. Looking at the medial side, we need to look at structures like the articulation, take a look at that angle. Also take a look at the axes and start imagining where those axes are going to be as we start moving through some of the motions that we're going to have at our foot and our ankle. Obviously looking at that motion, we're looking at plantar flexion. And then what I'm attempting to do here is starting to move some of the bones on the other bones. So understand that we're going to have a little bit of motion happen between the calcaneus and the talus. We're going to have some motion happen between the talus and the navicular, because each of these motions are going to have an independent but yet linked function. So obviously we're looking at kind of a side view or medial view here. We're going to imagine that the table is the ground. So what I want you to look at here is where that navicular is in relationship to the ground. Remember that navicular is going to have a little bit of an arch around it. As I start to pronate, what we see is that navicular actually starts to drop. It starts to go towards the plantar aspect of the foot a little bit. Very important to know, because we're actually going to do something called a navicular drop test with our patients. Also start to note on how my foot uses a rocker system. So we're going to have four basic rockers. We're going to have a heel rocker, which is shown here. We're going to have an ankle rocker, which is going to be the next rocker. Then we're going to have a forefoot rocker, which is going to be right around the MTP joints. And we're going to have a toe rocker. This is looking at pronation. Now watch the bones and how they move with pronation. Watch that calcaneus slide out of the way and how that talus kind of slides down and locks into place. Really important to know as we move forward through this material, really understand the osteology. It's my opinion that if you understand the osteology behind all this, you're really going to understand then the myology and how and why we have the system that we have. So there's an example of the other rockers, the forefoot rocker and the toe rocker. So just make sure you're aware of how that foot hits the ground, understand how the foot acts in the open chain and how the foot acts in the closed chain. I really want you to spend some time with this material. Go back, watch these videos a lot of times. These are going to be very, very important as we move forward, because we're going to start adding in things like the tibia fibula motion. We're also going to add in things like the knee, hip, and obviously the pelvis. So looking at kind of a back to front view here, obviously what the advantage we have now is we can see the articulation between the tibia and the fibula and the talus. Now if we're moving in to closed chain dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, realize that the foot's not going to be the moving part. It's going to be the tibia and it's going to be the fibula. So understand that we have a concave surface moving on a convex surface. Also understand that there's going to be a little bit of transverse plane motion there as well. Remember that medial and lateral rotation. Obviously what we're looking at now is going to be more of an open chain. So obviously now the talus, or the foot complex, is moving on the tibia and the fibula. This is a medial view. So really get to know this view well. You're going to watch me kind of mess around with the bones here for a couple seconds, because it's kind of like operating really, really large chopsticks. It was actually kind of interesting. So now we're looking at a dorsiflexion, and really kind of watch not only that motion at the talus, but watch how all those other bones react. Okay, this is really the nice advantage here, because we can watch all these bones without having the for lack of a better term, the obstacles or the obscurity of having a lot of other tissue over top of that, overlying those structures. So just really get a good idea how those bones move. This is obviously a front to back view, or AP view. So what we're looking at here, obviously I've moved away the fibula so we can just watch the tibia, is watch that tibia move, watch how it rotates. Okay, so as we dorsiflex, or kind of unlock, we're going to medially rotate that tibia. As we plantar flex, we're going to laterally rotate that tibia. So just kind of watch how that happens. Watch why that happens too. Look at the medial aspect of the talar dome versus the lateral aspect of the talar dome. You can kind of see how those bones just kind of slide into place. Looking at a little bit of supination here. I understand my hand's in the way for a good portion of it, but just get a good appreciation for how that calcaneus moves, how the other motions happen, because this is going to be very important as we move forward. So honestly, another medial view here, looking at some of the features. Memorize these features. Look where, what I'm pointing at here is where the tarsal tunnel is, and understand the structures that pass through that tarsal tunnel. Understand why that is important, how a pulley mechanism really does happen at the foot and the ankle.